Welcome back, boxing fans. It never surprises me when I go to channels like Dante, Ego, LDBC channels, uh, the bullshit narratives they consistently push on their channels. We know Ego's consistently been pro PBC, anti everybody else. And this was only confirmed once again when he came out in his most recent video talking about how the David Benavidez versus the David Morrell fight is the biggest fight of 2025. What are you, fucking high? The biggest fight of 2025. Like, people say things even they don't fucking believe. Because nobody that follows boxing and is a hardcore thinks that Morrell versus Benavidez is the biggest fight of 2025. Literally, fucking nobody thinks that. Literally, Amanda Serrano, Katie Taylor 3 is a bigger fight than fucking that. Literally, it is. It'll do more pay-per-views than Morrell versus Benavidez. No chance of that not happening. Right? Like, it's cool that you like the PBC, and it's cool the PBC looks like maybe they'll put out more fights than they did this year. Because this year, they've done fucking nothing. Right? 5 fight cards in a whole year. That is pathetic. Pathetic, right? When you think about what other promotional companies were doing. Even Golden Boy, which is a much smaller promotional company with a much smaller stable, has put out far more fight cards than that. So it gives you some kind of indication of what a bad year it's been for the PBC. But, they've been their first year, obviously, away from Showtime, their first year transitioning to a new platform. So, you give them a bit of leeway and hope that they will get their ducks in a row, and in 2025 they'll come out swinging and contribute like they did in 2023 when they had a great year, right? So I'm not hating. I'm just putting it out there as a fact, the reality of the situation. And if you like the PBC, that's cool. But the reality is, you're paying for fucking 85% of what you get from the PBC, right? Literally, a company that came out and said they're not going to do pay-per-views have turned into a company that only does pay-per-views, right? And we know with Canelo and Tank Davis, those are the two primary pay-per-view sort of arms of revenue that they have. They're trying to sort of turn David Benavidez, but David Benavidez has already been on 3 pay-per-views, none of which have been successful, right? His fight with Andrade did fucking shitty numbers. His fight with Plant did disappointing numbers. His double-header fight on Tank Davis didn't do much better, right? And that's a double-headed card, right? And still it did very disappointing numbers. Now he's going to come out and fight an unknown Cuban fighter like David Morrell. And you guys think that fight's going to do good, that fight's huge. Outside of hardcore boxing fans, the majority of people don't even know who the most of the people on that fight card are. And they definitely don't know who David Morrell is. They would be better off throwing David Benavidez in with fucking Jake Paul, because at least then it would do over 1 million buys, right? Let's be honest. Jake Paul is the face of American boxing. David Benavidez should be possibly trying to get on one of his cards with MVP Promotions, and guaranteed they're going to at least do more pay-per-view buys than they will under the PBC and Al Heyman. But, don't take this as if I'm hating on the PBC or hating on this fight. This is a fight I've wanted. I'm happy it's getting done. But this is literally what we call a hardcore boxing fans fight. This is not a fight that you can make money off of. This is not a fight that's going to put out big numbers and be successful financially for the promotional company. It's just not that kind of fight, even though it's significant. And it's a fight card hardcore fans really want to see, because you're getting 2 of the best fighters from within the PBC platform fighting against each other, both prime, right? So it's an exciting fight. No titles on the line. So you got to be sort of honest about what it is. We know right now the best fighter at that division, without a doubt, is Better BF, right? He proved that by beating Bivol. As far as these two guys, they are contenders. Contenders at the 175-pound weight class. They're not huge stars, even though Mike Tyson coined the phrase Mexican monster, outside of people that use David Benavidez to try to hate on Canelo Alvarez. You know, nobody's buying the whole fucking Mexican monster scenario because he's never been that great of a fighter, and he ain't looking that great of a fighter now that he's moved up to 175, right? The question is the winner of this fight going to step up and force a fight with Beterbiev, right? That would be a ballsy move and would be a huge fight, a far bigger fight than this one, right? It could not be bigger because obviously it'd be for undisputed light heavyweight world title against a guy that obviously is a monster in Beterbiev. But, you know, as far as the fight, I'm excited. I've been saying for a long time now that I think Morrell was the best fighter at 168. His last performance kind of disappointed me. So at that point, I kind of still think, okay, maybe I was wrong. Maybe Canelo Alvarez isn't, you know, fallen so far that Morrell is better than him. At this point, I'd have to sort of favor Canelo over Morrell, you know, at least temporarily. We'll see what happens moving forward. Obviously, Morrell is much younger, so he can continue to improve, get better. Obviously, he hasn't had that many fights, and he hasn't really had the kind of step-up competition a guy in his position should have had already. Obviously, jumping in now to fight Benavidez, that's a big jump. Benavidez has already had some high-level fights under his resume, whereas Morrell hasn't really had any. His last fight at 175 probably was against the best opponent he's been in with, but not the kind of opponent anybody looks good against. So don't use that as a way to necessarily discriminate against him. We'll have to see what he does against Benavidez, who's a much different kind of fighter. I think his foot speed and his hand speed are going to be too much for Benavidez. I definitely know his foot speed is far better than Benavidez, and that's something he's going to have to exploit. Obviously, David does have pretty fast hands, so that could be, you know, sort of evened out as far as that's concerned. But the feet, there's no doubt that Morrell's footwork and foot speed is on a whole nother level than David Benavidez. And as far as power, at this point, I wouldn't say that one fighter is necessarily a harder puncher than the other, because Morrell's had some sensational knockout performances, right? And showed really thundering power. And David Benavidez obviously has been similar. Now that they both moved up to 175, there's questions about how well are they going to carry that power up now that they're at a bigger weight division. The opponents they fight are obviously going to be heavier and more able to absorb the punishment. So it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be very educational as well. So as far as the fight itself, I'm super excited. Super excited. I still think it would have been better to put it on a doubleheader with Tank Davis, who has again a mediocre opponent in Lamont Roach, which isn't going to sell very well on pay-per-view. So at least if you put those two mediocre fights on one pay-per-view, it would make more sense. And as far as having David Morrell and David Benavidez as the headliner, why? David Benavidez doesn't have the fan base Tank Davis has. So why would Tank Davis have to give up being the headliner in the fight, considering Tank Davis has the legitimate world title and David Benavidez and Morrell don't? They're not fighting for a legitimate title because they don't have a legitimate title. Tank Davis is the WBA super champion at 135 pounds. Morrell and Benavidez are baby belt holders for the WBC and WBA. That's what they are. So, you know, you can't even really classify them in the same situation or the same group. And then you get to the undercard. I've already talked about this, but I felt the undercard is very disappointing, right? I mean, if Cruz was rematching Rayo, okay, that would be a very good fight to lead into the Morrell-Benavidez fight. Then you have Fulton and Figueroa after that as the third fight. And at that point, you have, you know, three really good fights back to to sort of be the main part of that card. Whatever you put under that wouldn't really matter too much, because those first three fights are the significant ones. Those are going to be the ones people talk about. Those are going to be the three that everybody watches. Those are going to be the three that are part of the pay-per-view, right? If you would have put Tank Davis versus Lamont Roach as the headliner, then you have four very good fights, and now you're talking about a legitimate pay-per-view, right? Something I'd be comfortable paying for. I mean, Tank Davis versus Lamont Roach, I mean, I know how it's going to turn out, but nonetheless, it's still a world title fight, and obviously a pound-for-pound top fighter getting back in the ring. For Morrell Benavidez, I think it's a real legacy fight for the two of them, and potentially could really sort of set the winner on a whole new level. And then, of course, Cruz versus Rayo, that would be the rematch for the close competitive fight they've already had, and it'd be for the WBA super title at 140 pounds. So there's your second world title fight on the card. And then, of course, then you have Figueroa, who is currently the WBC champion at 126 pounds, fighting a rematch versus, Stephen Fulton, the man who beat him at 122 pounds. Now it's his opportunity to get revenge against Fulton at 126 pounds. So right there, you're talking about a pretty intriguing fight. Fulton and Cool Boy put on a very exciting back and forth fight, so you'd expect this fight to be similar. Rayo and Cruz put on a very good fight, so you'd expect that to be similar as well. You could expect, of course, Benavidez and Morrell to be a really explosive fight, potentially somebody getting fucking flatlined in that fight. And then, of course, Tank Davis fighting Lamont Roach. Well, we know Tank Davis is going to knock him out. It's just a matter of how many rounds is it going to be before that happens. So right there, you can see the excitement behind it. But for what they're giving us, it ain't bad. There's no Tank Davis fight. Rayo is not fighting Cruz in a rematch. And all you have is basically Cool Boy Steph and Figueroa. To me, that's pretty disappointing. I ain't very excited about it. And as far as paying $80 to $90 on a pay-per-view, that just doesn't really do anything for me. When I saw that card, I wasn't excited. I didn't look and go, damn, yeah, I can't wait to see these fights. No, just the opposite. Outside of the main event, the other fights were kind of, I'll watch them, but I can't say I'm excited either way. If I miss those fights, I probably wouldn't go back and watch them after the fact. Let's just be honest. And I can do that. And I got tons of videos on that website that I've never went back and watched, because, when you know who wins, it's just not nearly as intriguing to watch these fights in replay. But let me know what you think about this overall card. And what do you think about Ego's, big statement that this is the biggest fight of 2025? Do you agree or disagree? And if you disagree, what fight do you think is going to be happening in 2025 that you think is bigger? Let me know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. Peace out.